Oh, hey Matt, how are you today?
Hey Charlie, I'm good. How's it going?
Yeah, it's all good. Just all in up in NYC, and it's really funny. We've just had a bit of a pre-chat, and we've been brought up in the same town of the lovely Wigan in the United Kingdom. Now, usually I ask everybody what coffee they have today, but I'm gonna actually change it up a little bit for us. I'm gonna say, what was Wigan like to grow up in?
Oh, do you know what? You sent me some things to preempt obviously what we were going to talk about, and obviously I've listened to a few of these episodes. I was like, I'm a coffee snob. I'm going to be ready for when she said. So I was there like my coffee ready. I'm going to be ready for it. But no, let's talk Wigan. Okay, so I mean I can't complain about it. Like obviously there is some certain quirks to growing up in a really northern town like Wigan. But
I think a quirks is a great word for it. I don't know,
I
that's a great
think it
word.
is. I don't think there's any way you could describe it. So for instance, I still live in Wigan. I just live in a different part to what I did when I was growing up. But I mean, over the years when I was at uni, I worked in a mobile phone store in Wigan. That was like my part-time job. So I've met various and different styles of Wiganers over the years, and some of them are great. Some of them I'm okay not dealing with again. But
Some of them are colourful, let's
yeah,
say.
let's just say that. I think that's a safer approach. But I can't knock it. I mean, some of my best friends are from obviously this area, and I think they shaped me to be the person I am now. I think I'd be very different if I didn't meet certain individuals.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I've always said I feel like I've met every walk of life from Wigan, which
Yeah.
then has then massively helped me in the future because I'm like, oh, you just remind me of my friend, blah blah blah, you
Yeah.
know. And the way I always this is my one thing that I always how would I describe Wigan? I just go, well, we have a thing called the Wigan Kebap, and trying to
Do you know what? I
explain.
had one of them recently. I was like, I've not had breakfast. I've not brought lunch. I'm just gonna. There's this van that pulls up at my other job, and I was like, see if they'll do it. I was like, can you get me a steak pie? Have you got a barm? Yeah, yeah. I was like, okay. Can you put it on the barm? And he was like, oh, so Wigan Kebab. And I was just like, oh, yeah, that. And he's like, there you go. I was like, oh my God.
Yes.
I came
Yes,
back
we
into
need
the
to
office and I have this monstrosity of carbs just in my palm of my hand. And I was like, it was worth it. It was worth it.
It's always worth it when you have one. It is. But for people who didn't quite catch that, because it is two slices of bread in a pie, and sometimes you put the wet pea in as well, isn't it? Like the mushy peas in. I used to put the mushy peas in because that's why I liked it.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't because I was like, I've got stuff all over my hands and
Yeah, you could
it's not practical.
swallow.
And you typically get that with a pie anyway, because as soon as you bite in, filling's just gonna go the
Yeah.
opposite direction. So yeah, this is the conversation that you wanted on the business podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we really need to get to the crux on what is healthy food for a business entrepreneur.
Exactly. If you want
It
some tactical
absolutely
approach, it is a Wigan Kebab. There you go.
is. So actually, yeah, going on to business then. Okay, you've got a few different adventures. What is it that you do, and why do you do it?
Okay, so I am a natural style wedding photographer based in Greater Manchester. Though I am based in Manchester, I do shoot wherever a good wedding takes me. Originally, I started doing wedding photography purely because I wanted something that was more. You get it now, where you'll get photographers, but they'll do landscape photography, and it's more. You shoot a picture, you edit it, you're happy with the edit, and then you post it to Instagram, where it might get some interaction, and then that's it. And you're like, oh, what do you do with that after that? It's got a very short shelf life. Is the best way to look at it. With wedding photography, it's something that could potentially stay in someone's family for generations, it's passed on and on. For instance, I saw my grandparents' wedding album for the first time a couple of months back. Completely different to what it is now in terms of shooting style, but I think just having them is just a really interesting thing. And obviously knowing that your work, that the effort that you put into something is going to last so long, and it'll still be something that's cherished over years.
And do you ever feel the pressure of that?
Oh yeah.
I know I was because I was brought up with I've every auntie or grandparents or cousins, like every family household we go into, the wedding photo is always on the
Yeah.
mantelpiece. Like that is, I don't know if it's every family, but that's definitely our family, and it's a tradition I will still do. But like you said, that's gone down generations and generations. So how do you
Yeah.
cope with that pressure?
I mean, I think the overall approach of wedding photography over the years has vastly changed. Like, for instance, when our parents got married, it would have been like usually generic, typical photos of like your mum and dad looking at the camera, group shots of like it's only key moments, and then before then it was film. Where if you don't know much about photography, obviously you have like in a film roll, you have like 36 photos. So you'd have to be so precise about what you were shooting and like everything being in focus, your composition being right, and there was a lot more thought put into that. And then obviously with that, a lot less photos taken. Now it's more like for myself, like it's a natural style. So like I'm essentially being a fly on the wall on that day.
Mm.
So it's capturing like natural smiles, natural laughs, and stuff like that. And it's just in terms of like the amount of photos in comparison to like previous decades and stuff like that, there is just a vast amount more than naturally will be with obviously the technology that we now have with cameras and stuff like that. So I mean, I think with the pressure of that, I think it's the safeness of knowing that I will overshoot, knowing that I'll have enough photos and that everything is at peak. Everything is like where it's meant to be. So the focus is in the correct place. Like all my settings are correct because I'm kind of in the motion and I know what to do now when it comes to like certain times of the day. Yeah, so I think it's the confidence of knowing that in my gear, I'm fine. I know what I'm doing. But with that, it's just come experience. It's come with time of like second shoot for photographers and just the natural of like going through the process of the day over and over and over.
So what I'm hearing is it's very much okay. In your process, you've looked at all the different elements and gone, okay, my equipment, I can do some pre-prep work and I've done all my camera settings and I know I've done all my checks around my equipment to know if things will fail. I know in the past batteries tend to go, the classic ones that go
Yeah,
if they're battery powered. And then what was interesting from a recent podcast, we had a CrossFit workout photographer. And
yeah,
what he was interested, he said, was because he has a very similar thing, very, very similar thing for you, where there is a lot of lots of things are going on. And how do you know what bits to be pointing the camera at? And for him, he just found, okay, he knows where the light is. So he
yeah,
knows what the light is at what time of the
yeah,
day is. So he'll stand in the best lighting position so that he can just take lots of photos and almost weigh weigh everything in his favor because he knows, okay, it's got the right lighting, it's going in this direction, and people are going to be roughly stood there, so I'm going to take these kind of photos. Is there any parallels to what you're saying with the wedding photography and you saying through experience where to stand, for
yeah.
example?
I mean, yeah, like I mean, I completely agree with like light is your best friend when it's there. When it's not there, however, it's more you need to adapt to certain scenarios. So, if for example, there's some wedding venues that are just vastly dark and they'll have like minimum lights, candlelit, and it's just more for the aesthetic that it looks that way. Not everything's going to have like massive bay windows where there's like tons of natural light, and then your camera will be like, cool, this is like the best settings you could ever have for like shooting these pictures and like for the best depth of field and the subject being lit up the right way and whatever. There are some venues that are just not designed like that, which is fair enough. That's fine. I think it then comes into then the photographer needing to know what they do in that circumstance, which is the thing for which again is just experience. Because there's sometimes because a lot of it with cameras is that they'll do the job for you. So when you visually look at it, it's like, oh, it's fine, it's lit, cool. And then you'll go into the editing process afterwards, like, oh, this is super noisy because it's cranked everything to make sure that shot looks well balanced, and it's then working behind that. So there are a few tips and tricks behind that, like jumping into different modes within the camera, changing shutter speed to kind of like balance other things out, and just to kind of compensate that. But yeah, experience is a big thing with that, and I think with that is like shooting with other photographers that have way more experience than you. Than you even. So in my case, it was the singer of my band has been a wedding photographer for the past 10 years. So when I was thinking of weighing up going into that field, he went, cool, come with me, second shoot with me today. There is absolutely no pressure on you to deliver anything that is good. You need to just experience it and then realize whether it's for you or not. Like, there is no, and I have that sort of like mentality now where people be like, oh, I'm thinking of going into this. I'm like, oh, come with me. I'm not going to pay you or anything, but I want you to experience this because it's vastly different from being a guest.
Yes. And
as it should be.
yeah, absolutely. Well, there's a couple of things I want to kind of touch on. But first, how does it feel to then as opposed to a guest?
I mean, I think when you're a guest, I had this because I went to one of my good friend's wedding last week, and I was like, "Oh my god!" Like the pace is so slow in comparison. Like when you're shooting weddings, you're kind of like, right, I need to observe. I need to see what people are doing. Is there certain things that could create a great photo, like a certain interaction, something like that? Has someone got like a really like visual laugh? You'll get what I mean, where some people kind of like go, huh. Other people like a full-on expression at when they laugh, and they make amazing pictures when stuff like that pops up. It's like keeping an eye on that. There's like keeping an eye on the times of when certain things are meant to happen in the day, and if things aren't happening, then you kind of need to nudge them along. Like, this should be happening now, and they're like, oh, okay. I'm like, cool. and kind of going along to that. So yeah, I think throughout the day, it's just like being consistent, being aware of where everything needs to be, working with the other vendors, with like the venue itself, anything else that's been supplied on that day. So then everyone kind of gets the best day out of it, essentially.
And so then going just back to your previous statement of how getting into a new industry and experience everything for the first time, and then you're currently in that position where you're doing a full-time job as well as as breaking into your passion. So what does it feel like when you're first kind of starting out in the doing it for the very first time?
So daunting. I'll give you the full story in this. So when we go back to the dreaded years of 2020, I was just a hobbyist photographer, where I watched a few Peter McKinnon videos. I took a few landscapes. I was like, I'm happy with this. This is fine. And like my main focus at that point was just being in a band, pushing being a musician essentially. And then over lockdown, my band split up. And it was kind of, I didn't really expect it because in previous years, I'd been like, oh, I know this band might be coming to an end. I'm going to start setting up a plan B. And this time I was like, oh no, I'm basically going to push all towards it and then see how it goes, essentially. Band splits up. And I'm like, oh, I have no backup plan. Like, there is nothing. And when you put so much time and so much of your identity into being this one thing, it can be quite a shock. And it 100% was for me because I was like, I don't know what my identity is anymore. Like, and it's like because you've put so much pressure and like reliance on other people to make something work. When it doesn't work, you're kind of like, oh, okay, I need to take time to think. So from that, I started going out doing photography, and I wanted to have like a reset. I wanted to think about what I was going to do, how I was going to approach it. And in hindsight, I think I now have a lot of a healthier relationship with being in a band and doing music than what I did then. Then it was kind of like make or break. This is it. This is everything. Now I'm kind of like, it's okay if I don't get signed. It's fine. Like, it's not like a massive problem. Because I've actually got something now where I just rely on myself to do that. So when it came to setting up the business, I remember specifically sitting there. It was like December 27th or something like that, and I had like my button over like the create Facebook page thing.
Yeah,
and I was kind of like, and I'd basically been sitting there like looking at it for about 3 weeks. So I was like, I'll wait until the new year. It's fine. And then I had this sudden epiphany being like, if I don't do it now, I'm never going to do it because I'm going to just keep avoiding it because it's more of like having a belief in yourself rather than be like, oh, it's fine, there's other people who can help me do something. It was like, this is on you. This is your responsibility to get this done now. And I remember I got to a point I was just like, oh, fuck this. Kind of pressed the button. And then that was it. And I remember like a month after I joined like a wedding photographers group, like networking with other photographers in the area and stuff like that. And I remember getting like such bad imposter syndrome. And I was like, oh my God. Like, my photography is nothing like that. My edit preset is nothing like anyone else has got. And I think it just came from like in the end being time. Like, you just need time to kind of like, you need the life experience of being able to know what wedding like how a day runs essentially, and like shooting a few like portrait sessions where you know where the best light is and how to like pose couples. Even though I phrase myself as not being like a posy photographer, like I'm against like posy wedding photos all the time, stuff like that. I'd rather capture couples being them essentially. But there are some times where you need to kind of just position them slightly, and then I'll go, cool, speak to each other. You've just got married, cool. And then I'll let them speak to each other. And some people are like, I don't know what to talk about, which is fine, which is cool. And then you kind of make like jokes, you make them laugh, you kind of just like tell them about how the day's going. Has anything happened that made them laugh in the morning that the other person didn't know? And then from that is then my job to work around them rather than making them do the work.
That makes so true, because you've got to remember at the end of the day, you're shooting just, I don't want to say normal people, just average Joes who are media professionals in any kind of speaking or acting capacity, and which is a skill. People think, oh, I can act, it's easy. Acting is not easy. No. Speaking on camera, not easy. And so when you're, like I said, just giving them that little bit of extra direction, or just even calming them down, or just reassuring them, just to kind of almost be natural and relaxed, gets those photos that they want at the end of the day. That's the desired outcome. And
like, I'll admit now, like, I'm still not natural on a camera. Like, the wedding I was at the other week, camera got pointed at me, did not know what to do. I was kind of like, like, I didn't know what I was gonna say. Like, I just pointed at me, and I just kind of had this like whimpered little smile. I was like, it's not a natural thing.
I always reference I'm the person that references Friends for everything, but there's that episode in Friends where Monica and Chandler are trying to get a photograph, engagement photograph, and she gets Joey in the end because Chandler just can't like smile, and that's the thing that always pops into my head anytime like a photo situation happens. Where you're like,
yeah, no, 100%. So I referenced that I did a reel. I think it was like earlier in the year. I did it where I called it Chandler Bing syndrome, and it was more the thing of reasons to why you should have a pre-wedding shoot. And I'll still vouch for this to this day, where it's like, you're going into an environment and you're expecting someone to shoot pictures of you, and you've never really had a camera pointing you that much. Like, it's a weird concept. Don't get me wrong. Like, it is. Like, I've just got engaged myself, so like it being like, we're thinking of like a pre-wedding shoot, and I'm like, oh my God, it's so awkward. And it's like, don't be a hypocrite. Like, you do this like on a weekly basis.
Yeah, so sorry, just to clarify that, what's the importance of that pre-wedding wedding shoot?
I think it's just to, one, get to know your photographer, trust how they will work with you on the day of your wedding. Like, apart from your actual person that you're marrying, the second person that's going to be closest to you on that day, because they're going to be observing what you're doing all day, essentially. Like, for 95% of the day, that'll be. So I think having that, it gives you that extra comfort, because you already know what's coming. When it comes to the portrait sessions on your wedding day, you've already been through it before.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes the day a lot easier if you've already had like a pre-wedding shoot. You know how it's going to work. You know what I'm going to say to you to kind of suggest certain positions, or like where you should walk around and stuff like that.
No, that makes sense, like you said, but that's intense. Like 95% of your day is literally like one person just following you around the whole time. You want to, on your wedding day, you want to feel as relaxed as you can be and just really enjoy the day and kind of forget that you're even kind of there. So no, that's a really good tip. That's a tip I would have never even thought about as well. You're
because
almost testing the
it's
water.
like the only times I'm not with them when it's not like multiple parts of the wedding day is when people are mingling, where it's like the guests just talking to each other, like laughing and stuff like that. The things that they want to capture that they might not be able to see because they're so busy with the other stuff and whatever.
So, like I said, you're doing this part-time and balancing it sort of with the main job. I love that you brought up that I call it the fuck it button, where it's like it's like the ripping off the band-aid, where the band-aid where you like literally have to go full in and just go and do it, because otherwise it's just forever, it'll just always be this little dream or vision. And unless you go and do some kind of action forward and press that, like I said, you just go, oh, fuck it, press it and do it. That dream will kind of never even happen at all. And now you're like, I always call it like stage one, because there's stages to growing a business, and you're in stage one at the moment. And how do you find the balancing act of doing the J job and then also trying to grow something that's very much for you?
Yeah. So I mean, in the first year, it was fine. It was a lot more manageable in comparison to now, because let's say I'm probably closer to 200% more bookings than what I had in my first year. So it was a bit, this year when it was peak season was a bit of a shock to the system, I think, because it was pretty much like I'm doing a wedding every single weekend for the entirety of summer. So it's essentially like the day after your wedding on the weekend, I like to send my sneak previews the day after, so then they have something. So if they want to post something on socials, they've got the proper pictures rather than something someone's taken on the phone.
Yeah.
So you're essentially working 7-day weeks for the entirety of a peak season, which is something I hadn't, like, in my head for some reason. Don't know how. I just hadn't computed the idea of that. I'm doing a full-time job and then doing a part-time job full on the weekends, and then keeping up with edits at night, then keeping up with anything else. So, for instance, band, if I'm doing a podcast, like, I've got to be there for interviews and whatever and all of that. Like, your brain just starts to, like, go, oh my God.
Like, what did I get myself in for?
I was like, shit.
But what have you even had? So the conversation I was having with a few of my like close friends and associates this week was, what is that tipping point? Now, it's called, obviously there's always an opportunity cost in business, when we individually always have a finite amount of time. Each day, each week, you can't work more than 7 days a week, for example. At some point you've got to see your fiance, eat, and just basically be a complex houseplant. Now, what is that tipping point for you where it's like, I need to start going more into the being full-time wedding photography, so you can do maybe some writing on the side, you can do some podcasts on the side. The other stuff becomes the side projects, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Like, I mean, the way I've thought about it and the way I've pitched it to my ever so lovely fiance for putting up with me and all my manic ideas, is that when I reach a certain volume of weddings, that's when everything else needs to start easing down. So maybe that might be next year, that might be the year after. I think it's very much dependent on how the end of this year looks, and then I can be like, okay, I need to see where I go with this, because or else I'm just going to be a melted puddle on the floor. But yeah, I think it comes to a point where the weddings start being like taken over, like most weeks of being like, I have so many, or like multiple bookings in 1 week, and then it's like taking over annual leave and stuff like that. I think that's when it's going to start getting tricky. So I think that's potentially either I need to like set a limit to myself and be like, you can only take on so many weddings, like it is not possible at this point to take on any more, or I need to start looking at other options and other avenues and being like, this needs to go.
Yeah. It's funny, you have concluded to the conversation we had, where it's really easy to listen to a lot of the big gurus who are like, you need to go all in, you need to go and do this 100% all the time. And I've actually always been a little bit against that, to say, actually, no, what's the lifestyle design that I'm trying to create here?
Yeah.
You have a house that has bills. You obviously, there's a certain amount of income that you need in order to support a lifestyle that you might want, as in obviously like living in Wigan requires a certain amount of money. You want to do some nice things with your fiance as well, which requires money. Or you have maybe some other personal, like I have CrossFit and nutrition coach, and I have lots of coaches around that I like to spend my money on. And it's almost, I do believe it's okay to have all of these multiple things going on, as long as there's some kind of overlapping, the adding value to you somewhere.
Yeah.
Like they're very much the podcast and you're all three of your little trifecta that you've got on are all very creative. And there's a very creative link between them all. So at this point, there's still adding a qualitative value. It's obviously not all of it's quantitative, but so there's a qualitative value that's giving you. A lot of my little projects are very much they are all very interlinked with each other, with a bigger plan, a bigger goal at stake. But that goal's not going to hit until a few years' time, for example.
No, absolutely, yeah. I think there has to be like a compromise, and two, like it has to scratch some sort of, like, in my case, a creative itch where it has to be doing something for you. Like, it can't just be like you're throwing all your time or what time you have left into something and you're getting nothing back from it. That's not a reward. Like, if you're not feeling like some like gratitude for being involved, like, for instance, podcasts, I love doing it. I really enjoy doing it. And from that, we get these opportunities that we never thought we'd ever get, and speak to people that we admired when we were in high school, and like stuff like that is just like a really humbling moment. So for that, that's the reward. Like, yes, it means like traveling down to Bristol to do a festival or stuff like that. But I think them stuff like that, it gives you, like I said, just a really humbling experience from it.
Because I'll be interested to know what things you've put in place to balance all of these different projects. I know I've got to think there's a way I'm able to pack so much stuff into a week, because I have a very strict routine, of which there's stuff that my gym time will never be able to get me during my gym time, because I'm trying to go to train for a high level competition in CrossFit. So if I don't go to that training, I'm not going to get to that goal. So no one can budge that time, for example. There's some set contingencies. But before you just go into that, can you explain what the podcast is as well, so there's people some context?
Yeah, sure. So, an Earful podcast is a podcast that typically covers alternative music. So, speaking to bands in the alternative music scene. However, we do tend to tipple into horror films from time to time. So, for instance, we spoke to Graham Humphreys, who did the original artwork for Evil Dead and Nightmare on Elm Street. And so we discussed that. We spoke to artists such as Blackstone Cherry, covered 2000 Trees, and spoke to multiple artists there. And it's more like getting into the crux of the creative process and stuff. And just, I think the beauty of podcasting is that it doesn't feel like an interview. It feels like a conversation, and anything can spawn from that. So if it's like a random conversation, then brilliant. I mean, we have a thing at every episode where we talk about what's the pet peeve. And they said it can be as minimal as you want it to be. If it's something that really annoys you, then go for it. And there has been some really interesting ones. There's been I think one was when someone touches the teeth on a fork because you want to eat.
Oh no!
It makes that clicking sound. That was one. I was like, do you know what? I've never thought of that until someone's pointed it out, and now that they have, I'm like, oh god, no, that's horrible.
Mine's really rogue. Mine's open drawers and open cupboards and open doors.
I get that.
I sit there and I can see something's open. I'm so distracted. I'm just looking at it, going, I need to close it. I'm literally looking at my drawers over there and going, they're closed. It's all good.
Yeah, no, I get that. my other half is prone for leaving her wardrobe doors open. When she's looked for like an item of clothing, she will leave all drawers and the doors open. I'm just like, I can't even get to my side of the bed. Like, what is going on?
How would you do that, you monster?
Yeah, mine's more like generic. So mine's like slow walkers. Like, it drives me insane. It literally drives me insane. Like, I'm like, it feels like when you're driving, is that one really annoying guy gets like right behind you. Like, I'm
Yeah,
that, but in walking sense.
that's been amazing. But yeah, so one of the sort of final question then is what? Oh yes, no, sorry, actually, skip that. So yeah, what are the sort of tips and tools that you've been using to balance all of these different creative projects?
Oh boy, so many. I mean, a one big key one for me at the current point, and I know it sounds simple, but it's just keeping on top of your calendar. Like, I mean, I have a CRM management system called Studio Ninja, which deals with like stuff to do with clients. So I don't forget like to send them emails for like contracts, invoices, etc., and all that. Any like key dates in terms of like final preparation emails I need to send, it does it for me rather than me trying to think about it and then going, oh, I need to send this. It does it all for me. And I praise the absolute high above of Studio Ninja for that. Other ones as well. Like, I mean, simple things that are just like the actual like photography software, as in like Lightroom. Like, it does what it needs to do. Like, presets are incredible for like, I have my own presets, but just the ability to kind of like manage things, like the technology that it has now where you can subject select, so you can separate it from the background a lot easier rather than having to like color it like people in and stuff like that. It's the dream. We're in the peak of technology now.
Exactly. Like, and there's discussions about like AI around video editing and obviously like presets and things that you can almost concentrate on the actual shooting part of it, and the technology now does a lot of the legwork, that the
Yeah,
repeatable legwork.
because I think people don't realize when you shoot a wedding, for instance, like, it's not necessarily the shooting part, which is the thing that you're necessarily paid for. It, like, obviously it is, but I think it's the aftermath of it. It's the post editing process of then, like, for instance, I'll take like 5,000 to 7,000 pictures per wedding. I
Oh
then
my
need to
god.
whittle that down to, like, I offer like a minimum of 400 from your day. I overshoot, so it always ends up being like 600 to 700. But I've still got to whittle that 5,000 pictures down to 600 that perfectly detail how your day went and perfectly show, like, articulate how like certain emotions were felt and like certain key moments of your day. So then when you look back in it, you go, wow, this was captured perfectly.
Wow, that is an insane number. I don't know if anybody's ever had to sit there and go through that amount of photos, but that's a lot.
Yeah,
It's
I
giving
know
me a
people who
headache
do a
just
lot
thinking
more
about
than me, but like a lot of it comes down to like with new cameras where you can just like you shoot multiple when it's like a key moment, you just hold it down and just kind of like keep it there and just keep shooting, because then it's like with group photos, you always tend to get like that one person who's got the right shot when you're like going through and trying to like pick which ones to, yeah, it's usually me. But yeah, it's to be on the safe side more or less.
Oh, amazing. I feel like we've covered a whole bunch of top tips, a whole bunch. I learned a lot about wedding photography and then balancing lots of projects. What is one thing that a person can buy from you that is under £100 that would add a ton of value to their lives?
I mean, I was thinking about this because obviously I've seen previous episodes. I could genuinely say like, oh, I do a pre-wedding shoot that is currently £80, and that gets you used to being in front of a camera and stuff like that. But I'm going to scrap that, and I'm going to go with the thing: if someone's genuinely interested in getting into wedding photography, I'd offer them to come along for the day and observe and shoot what they want to shoot, with no pressure, just so that they could experience it.
Yeah, I think that's amazing because there's like you said that is absolutely invaluable when it comes to trying to break into something new that you're passionate about and just being exposed to it all, and being able to have that experience. So I'll make sure that you can obviously make sure to be able to get in hold of you, and I'll still link to your website below so people can see.
I mean, like with where I got asked, someone told me, "Oh, come along and observe, etc." I've then done that with one of my friends who wants to get into it, and then he's done it. So I think that act of like somewhat kindness has kind of like been passed along.
Yeah,
and I think it's like then creating community over like competition, which I'm a heavy, strong advocate for.
I love it. And you've heard of random acts of kindness?
Yeah.
That it's the same. It's the same thing. It's the same notion. You just keep karma, just keep passing it forward, and so at some point, and I wholeheartedly believe this: if you keep passing it forward, it does go full circle back. And sometimes it full circles back in the unlikeliest of scenarios. And the amount of times that's happened to me over the last 10, 15 years is insane. Like, we just go, how? I mean, I just did this one little thing that I thought would really help them, and it's come back in like double, triple the amount of good stuff I pass forward. So I believe that.
No, absolutely. Like, I wholeheartedly agree in it. Like, I just don't see why there would be any other way that you could do it. Like, I just don't get this whole thing of like, no, I will be the best and you won't. Like, fuck off.
No, that'll lift each other up. That's the whole point. If we're small businesses, like we are 95% of the UK businesses, and just even that little 1% power of helping each other up just massively helps everybody as a community and as a group.
Like, if one person thrives, the other person thrives. So why wouldn't you just pass it along? It makes more sense.
I love it. And I'm gonna finish it there because that is just exactly where we want to finish it. That's a beautiful sentence. Well, thank you so much, Matt, for coming on and coming onto the podcast. It'll be always great to have you on again. And I hope you have a great rest of the day, evening.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.